Okay, what's your full name?
William Franklin and Noonan.
Why did your parents choose that name for you?
My grandfather's, my father's father, he was Frank William Noonan, and I was the first grandchild, and so they named me William Franklin Noonan.
Did you have a nickname growing up?
I'm sorry.
Did you have a nickname growing up?
Everybody called me Bill except for my aunts and uncles. My mother had 4 sisters and my father had 4 brothers. And so all the aunts and uncles, till the day they died, called me William.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Iowa City, Iowa, in 1940.
Do you know how your family lived there, decided to live there?
Yeah, we actually, we lived on my mother's farm. Both my father and my mother were originally lived on farms. And so my grandmother on my mother's side, her husband had passed away, and she had a hired man that kind of helped her with the farm, but my mother and I lived with her on the farm.
So were there any other family members that lived there other than your grandma?
No, we had my mother had a brother who was autistic, had autism, and he was like one year older than I was, I think, or 2 years older, and but he was very difficult to handle.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny. I was like, he would go and just sit down somewhere, and nobody could get him to get up, and they'd have to go get me, and I'd come out because I was able to talk him into getting up. And another funny story growing up with him was we had on the farm, we had what's called a cow tank. That's where it was a big tank that was filled with water, and that's where the cows would come to drink.
Oh.
And so when we were growing up, we used to, during this summer, we always just wore these bib overalls, you know, where the straps come up over the shoulders, but no shirt, and shoes and stuff, right? Well, on hot days, we used to like to get into the cow tank. And my mother and grandmother, you know, they just like forbid us. They did not want us getting in the cow tank. And so we would go down there and we'd get close to the cow tank and the water would be there. So we'd figure out we were going to get in and that they would never know. So when we got back to the farmhouse, either my grandmother or my mother would say, "Have you two been in the cow tank?" No, we didn't do that. And we could never figure out how they, every time we got in there, that they knew it. And the reason was that when we were hooking the straps over our shoulders to hook them on the top of our overalls, we always got the straps twisted. And so when they put them on in the morning, they always made sure they were flat and straight. So every time we came in with the straps twisted, they knew we'd been in the cow tank.
What was your farm like? Did you have lots of animals and stuff?
Yeah, we had on my grandmother's, on my mother's side, there really wasn't much there. That had the hired man that just did a few crops and stuff, but there were some cows, but not many pigs. And I remember we used to milk the cows by hand. We had a little stool, it was a T like this, and you pull it up, you sat down, you put the bucket on the ground, and you'd milk the cows by hand. So I remember doing that as a kid. And then on my grandfather's, or my father's side, he had cows that he milked also. But he also had a lot of pigs, spotted Poland China breed, I think it was. But he used to raise those and then sell them.
What is your earliest childhood memory?
Oh boy. Let's see. I think just being on my mother's farm, that was where, you know, some of those stories I just told you, those were very early on, early when things started. I don't remember really anything prior to that. And I was like 3, 4 years old at that time.
Can you describe some of the personalities of some of your family members?
On my father's side, my grandmother and grandfather were just great individual people, and they had, like I said, they had 5 boys, and their farm was just gorgeous, well kept and everything. And on my mother's side, it was not as nice a farm, and but great people. And my father was a very dysfunctional individual. It didn't take to authority very well. And at that time, you could have, if you had like a problem child, so to speak, you could actually enroll them in the Army. I mean, it wasn't like a voluntary, you could just like take them to the Army and say, here you are. And so my grandparents did that to my father. Well, he was supposed to be in there for 2 years, but they actually discharged him, I want to say about 17 or around 20 months, so like 4 months early. And he got a discharge, but it's not, you know, wasn't with distinction. It was rather the opposite end, because 17 months out of the total time he was in the Army, he spent in the brig. Because every time he got out of the brig, he would go AWOL. In other words, he would leave. And then they'd have to come and find him and bring him back, and they'd put him back in the brig, and he'd be in there for a while. But next time he get out, away he'd go again. So that would, and he kind of continued that all through his life. I mean, you can never count on him for anything. In other words, if he was, I had to use the car, we only had one car. If I had to use a car for a date, and was supposed to go on the date at 7 o'clock, and you know, he might not show up at home until 8:30. So you could keep calling and saying, I'm going to be late. That was so embarrassing, you know. And my mother she was a very nice person, and she put up with a lot.
What was your favorite thing to do for fun?
Well, you know, you had a very, it was a very different lifestyle at that time, especially when you're young. You know, I mean, you just make do with what you have, and that's really, you make your own fun somehow, whether it was going walking in the woods or just goofing around, wrestling or something. But I mean, you had to just do your own thing. And then, you know, obviously as you get a little older and you start going to school, then you develop more relationships and friends, and go on from there.
What was school like for you as a child? Did you have any like favorite subjects?
School was actually extremely easy for me, fortunately. I liked math, didn't care for English and history too much, but especially all through grade school and high school, I mean, school was just school, and I had, my grades were good, and I graduated sixth in my class. There's only second in my class. No.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to high school in Davenport, Iowa. We moved, when my father got out of the service, we moved from the farm. We actually moved to Black Hawk, Illinois. And we were the first family of Eastbrook, aunts and uncles, the whole family. They all lived in the farming community. It was an Irish Catholic farming community. And that probably wasn't, they all lived within a 35, 40-mile radius of everybody. And we were the first family that left, that went to a different state. And so then we were there a couple of years, and then we moved to Davenport. And I went through grade school in Davenport and high school in Davenport.
Where'd you go to college?
University of Notre Dame.
Did you participate in any like school, like sports or activities in high school or college?
Yeah, I participated in baseball and basketball in high school, and then basketball in college. Growing up, sports was just, the only thing in your life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you lived around.
What education did you get past high school?
Just graduated from Notre Dame, just 4 years of college.
Did your family support you going to college?
Yeah, they were pleased that I was going to college, and I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship. Otherwise, I would have never been able to go to college. But supportive, I really don't know the answer to that. I guess I can. I went there 4 years and graduated and came home, and my parents were never on campus one day out of 4 years. And they lived, it was like 5 hours from where I went to school to my home.
Do you remember any like fads from your youth, like popular hairstyles or like certain clothes that people would wear?
Well, yeah, when I was in high school, everybody was wearing white shoes, white loafers, and then like black pants with the peg legs, skinny legs at the bottom, and like pink stitching down the side. And then they had the haircuts. A lot of them, they would let their hair get kind of long, and then they combed it back, and then the big wave in front. It was either that, everybody had that, or a crew cut, which.
Did you have any childhood heroes?
I really didn't. The awareness of what was going on in the world at that time is just so far removed from what it is today I mean, it's unbelievable. In other words, you didn't, you know, there was baseball, when we got TV eventually, you know, there was one game a week on, no basketball. I mean, all you knew was your own little town
Yeah.
and what was in the newspaper there. And then, growing up, I never read the newspaper anyway. So it was just, get up, go to school, do your thing, and, you know, on from there.
Did you have any favorite songs or like genres of music?
Just, I guess I was like most teenagers. The songs I liked were the ones that were popular on the radio, you know. And, the Four Seasons and a lot of those way back when the groups had, you know, a lot of hits. And, like, you just liked what everybody else your age liked, you know.
Yeah. Did you have any pets?
I had a newspaper route at one time, and they had a contest to get the most, get the most new subscriptions. And I won that, and the prize was I got a Cocker Spaniel. It was the prize, and so it was a taffy colored hair, and so we called him Taffy. And
That's cute.
ended up, he ended up catching his neck between getting in and out of the car one time. The door got shut on him. And so then after that we took him up to my grandparents, and he stayed on the farm after that. And then we had another dog, a Weimaraner, which is a bigger dog, short-haired dog. It's actually a hunting dog, and it was, I wouldn't say it was a pet. I mean, it was just a kind of a high-strung dog that caused a lot of problems.
Did that one have a name?
I can't remember the name. I guess I kind of blocked him out of my life.
What was your religion growing up?
Catholic.
Did you go to church?
I did. Went to church all the time up until, I want to say in the early 80s, and then there were some things that happened that kind of maybe disillusioned me about what was going on.
Were you ever mentioned in a newspaper?
Yeah, because of athletics, I was in the newspaper quite a bit, and that was because of athletics. I was never in the newspaper for, robbing a bank or something.
Well, that's good. What, like, events in the world had the most impact on you when you were growing up?
Again, I would have to go back to what I was talking about earlier, you know. The communications and stuff were so limited. In other words, I knew we were at war.
Yeah.
And, I knew my father went in the service, and I knew my uncles went into the service, and I knew that where they went, but I really didn't know why, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we're fighting North Korea, and so who's North Korea? I didn't even know where North Korea was. And so it made no sense. So to say that had an impact on my life, there was just, information was so limited that you just,
Okay. How is the world different today than it is, or than it was when you were a child?
You know, in my lifespan, memory that I have of it, it basically covers the whole spectrum. In other words, I remember wagons, the horses pull wagons and driving that, and then remember when people were getting their first cars, and obviously no TV, and radio was your only source to anything outside, and phones were, today with cell phones and all
Yeah.
that, back then you just had a phone on the wall. It was like a cabinet, and they had a receiver on, that you put your ear, and then it had like
Like a microphone.
yeah, that you spoke into, right? And, we have all the talk in today's world about invasion of privacy and all that stuff, the government spying on everybody, and people spying on other people and this and that. Back then, like if everybody in the farm, they had a ring that was assigned to, like, let's say mine is 2 shorts long, so if somebody's calling me, they would go ring, ring, and then somebody else would be 4 shorts. That was their number, right? And but everybody was hooked into the same phone line, and so the only way, if you come in from outside, the only way you'd know whether somebody was using the phone or not is to go pick up the receiver and listen. Well, and so the phone would ring. It rang all the time, whether it was for us or not, And so every time the phone rang, they'd say, Bill's calling Allie, right?
Yeah.
So if I wanted to listen what Bill and Allie are talking about, all I had to do was go over and pick up the phone and listen, and because you couldn't tell when somebody else on the line picked up the receiver. So you at no time did you have any clue whether you had 5 or 10 people listening to you, or you had a private conversation. And so it's and moving forward, then all at once we got phones where you dial the number instead of 2 shorts and a long. All at once we had TV on a limited basis, and a lot of the original TVs that came out, instead of having a square or rectangular screen, they had a round screen, which really distorted the images and stuff. And then you heard about color TV, but nobody really had color TV. So the closest we would get to color TV was take saran wrap, like blue, and put it over the screen, and so it would give us, at least it wasn't black and white, it was all blue.
So it looked like everybody was underwater.
Yeah, but it's and so then, you move on, we just take television, all at once, and now you look at what we have nowadays, and not only what we have, but what you can do with them.
Yeah.
And the internet, and I mean, when I was really young, a lot of the farms, they didn't even have electricity. They still had the little oil lamp, and so I was in the beginning of electricity, phone, TV, and just on through where we are today. So And you kind of reach, I have anyway, I'm speaking for myself, like the internet stuff today and the phones, this and that, it's like passing me by. I mean, and it's like I'm so far behind now.
Yeah.
I feel like I can never catch up.
Yeah.
So then I just bag it and do what I know how to do,
Yeah.
and let the rest take care of itself.
Who was the oldest relative that you remember as a child?
That would be my grandfather.
Were there any like interesting like stories that they told you or anything when you were a child?
You know, it's they're always telling stories, but they're stories that, for me anyway, you couldn't relate to it.
Yeah.
In other words, they're telling me a story, but I didn't know this guy or this person. And as a result of not being able to connect the dots, so to speak, between A and B, you listen to the story and you hear the story, but then years or so later it means nothing to you.
Are there any stories about famous or infamous relatives in your family?
Well, famous, I don't know if that word applies, but my brother played football for the Miami Dolphins the year that they went 17-0, and that team is today still famous because the record stands. And they, you know, it's been tradition over the years that the team that wins the Super Bowl gets invited to the White House.
Yeah.
And so they went 17-0 and 72. And so this year, in 2013, they got invited to the White House.
Oh, I saw those pictures.
Yeah, and the reason they didn't get invited when they won the Super Bowl was Richard Nixon was involved in Watergate up at the time. So he was about to be impeached and this and that. He had his plate full.
Yeah.
He skipped that ceremony.
When you got married, how did you find out that you were going to be a parent for the first time?
My wife went to the doctor.
How many kids did you have?
Let me count. No, I have 4 kids.
Why did you choose their names?
My oldest one, Kathy, we just kind of, we both liked the name. And so she was named Catherine, and then when your mother came along, we liked Bridget. But at the time, I don't know if you know your mother's middle name, do you?
Amen.
Yeah. At the time, my mother was very sick in the hospital, and there was a nun at the hospital that was just extremely nice to her. And her name was Sister Mary Amen. And so we named Bridget Amen Noonan. And then Jeff and Jennifer, twins, we just try to find, it's like Mutt and Jeff and Jennifer. 2 names that kind of connected a little bit.
Do you have any funny stories about your kids when they were growing up?
There was one story, it's funny, but it's not funny. We were just talking about this morning. There's a dam over here, Cherry Creek Reservoir, and my father had got the kids a toboggan for Christmas, and it was one of those that was just flat board curled in front, had a rope that you could hang on, but you couldn't steer it. And I mean, you know, and so when you went down the hill, you just went down the hill,
Yeah.
and that was it, right? So there's, at this Cherry Creek Dam, there is a huge hill that goes down and actually down to the interstate.
Oh.
And so we all went over there, and so Kathy and your mother got on to take the first ride. So I pushed them off the edge, and down they're going down the hill. And I looked down the hill, and at the bottom of the hill is a barbed wire fence with two strands of barbed wire, one about this high and one about this high off the ground. And they are, and I mean, they're trucking, right? But it was kind of rough going down that hill, and all at once the toboggan got sideways, and they exploded. You know, there was snow flying everywhere, and so they got up and they pulled the toboggan back up the hill, and then Jeff and Jennifer are saying, "I want to go. I said, "No, this is a one trick pony. There's no more trips down the hill." And another funny story is when we first moved to Colorado, moved into a brand new house, and so after a while I noticed I'd be up in the kids' bathroom, and I noticed like water on the floor, and so I got all the kids together and took them up and gave them instructions 101 on how to adjust the shower curtains, you know, one inside and one outside, and so this is how you do it, right? Because you kids are getting water all over the floor, right? And so, okay, not a problem, right? So then I still got water on the floor. So I bring them all back up again, and I said, "Who isn't doing what I told you to do, right?" "Oh, we're doing exactly what you told us to do." And as it turns out, they were. And what had happened was the water pipe for the shower head, right where there was a U where it come through the wall. At the top of that, there was a pinhole in the water pipe. And so it was squirting water up through the rafters onto the ceiling. And the water was dripping through the ceiling. And so that's where the water was coming from. And another one, I don't know if it's a funny story, but it was rather productive effects. It was the kids always used to claim about who used gas. You know, you used all the gas, you didn't put any in. And it was just a constant battle every time somebody took a car, so-and-so used all gas. So what I did is I took and filled the car with gas and said, from now on, whoever takes the car, it'll be full when you leave, and I want it full when you get home. So whatever you used, you have to put back in before you bring the car. And that worked. That kind of eliminated the problem.
Yeah, that's smart.
There's more stories for the kids, I'm sure, but I have to, you know, it's just, one time we were at the beach, and we're all walking along the beach, and all at once this is kind of a scary story actually, this huge wave come in and just water over everybody, and stood up and looked, and see none of the kids, don't see one of them. And then all at once, out 15, 20 yards, here's one head popping up out of the water. Because they had what we call rib tides, that if they caught a hold of you, they could just drag you right out to in the ocean.
Where did you guys live when you, like, with my mom and like all your kids? Like, what places did you guys live?
Okay, we lived in, started out in Davenport, Iowa. That's where I built our first house. And I'm sure you're aware that Clay Miles, he lived next door to this friend of your mother, right? And so I worked at Ford Motor Company at the present time, at that time. And then there was a company, subsidiary like of General Motors, that was getting into the leasing end of automobiles. And they were recruiting people all over the United States. So one of the people that was in my office ended up going to work for them. And they stationed him in Atlanta, Georgia. And then they talked to me and another person that worked in my office, and offered us a job, and were going to send me to Los Angeles, California, and he was going to San Diego. And we both thought that if we're going to be in the automobile business, there was no better place to be in it than the largest market in the country, you know. And so we moved to California, having never been west of the state of Iowa. I mean, it was quite a large decision to make at the time. And then we got out there and we got looking at houses, and houses were so much more expensive than what they were in Iowa. And to make a long story short, we found a house that worked for us, and so we bought that, and then I got transferred back to Denver. And so that I was in California from 69 to 75, and then we moved here in 75, and so we've lived here in Colorado ever since.
So you worked in the car business? Is that like your profession?
Well, it's when I got out of school, I went back home, and I didn't have a job at the time. And so I was looking for employment, and Ford Motor Company had a district office in Davenport. And so I interviewed with them, and they ended up hiring me. And what they did is they had, we represented Ford Motor Company, and we went and contacted dealers, And we would take the orders from each dealer for how many cars they wanted and this and that. And I was doing that. I mean, I worked for Ford Motor Company at the time. This was when the Ford Mustang was originally introduced. It was like 1963, and it sold for like I think it was $17.99 and everybody in the world wanted one. And some dealers, you know, would have somebody come in, and so they take an order from a guy, and so then he'd be calling and say, you know, when am I going to get my car? We'd have to tell him, well, there's a good chance that you may not even get a car this year. I mean, so it may be next year. You know, I mean, that's how big the demand was. And so then I was with them until we, like I said, we moved to California, and I was working for the General Motors, and that was the same type of a job, other than now it was the focus was on automobile leasing, and we trained dealers how to present the lease, how to figure the lease, just take it from A to Z, and so that was what I did all while I was in California. And then the program wasn't going over well in California because there were some banks that came out with a program where on all leasing deals, the dealer got 100% of his profit up front the day he signed the paperwork. Where with our program, he actually got it on a monthly basis. In other words, out of every payment, just as an example, if the payment was $250, maybe 25 was his, and then the rest went to the finance company. But if he had 100 leases, he had 100 times 25 income coming in. And so they started kind of winding down on the West Coast, and then that's when I got transferred here to Denver. But I ended up being the only one left from the West Coast. But we still had dealers that needed training and stuff. And so I would be in Denver a week, and then I would go Denver, Phoenix for a week, San Diego for a week, LA for a week, San Francisco for a week, Portland a week, Seattle a week, Salt Lake City a week, and back home. So that was, and it wasn't as bad as it sounds, because the home office actually took care of where we're having the meetings. So they would ship all the materials to the hotel. So when I got there, all my booklets and everything were already there. And the classes were Tuesday, Wednesday, until noon on Thursday. So they were 2.5 day classes. So I would leave Denver on Monday. I'd get there, and then class would start Tuesday, Wednesday, and then at noon Thursday, I would fly back home. And so the idea was Friday I would use for preparation for next week's class. But since it was, classes were all the same, so, and the material was shipped. So basically, I had Friday, Saturday, Sunday off every week at home, and a lot of times on Monday didn't leave till Monday afternoon. So, I mean, that wasn't gone quite as much as
Yeah.
it sounds like.
If you could have any other profession, what would it be?
Well, I originally thought when I got out of college that I wanted to be a FBI agent. And I, you know, don't ask me why, but that's just that, maybe I thought it was a cool job or something. But then I found out at that time, you also had to have a law degree to be
Yeah.
it was the FBI, which I didn't have. And, had no interest in getting either, so that kind of pushed that aside, and then the job with Ford Motor Company came along, and that was a job, and so then you know, after I came to Denver, they wanted to transfer me from Denver to Chicago. Well, I already had come from the Midwest,
Yeah.
and I liked Denver, and so that's when I went into the retail end of the car business with Cadillac. And I was with Cadillac a total of 32 years. And it was a lot of hours, and but it was, we survived, made enough to have a, you know, fairly good existence. And the comforting thing about being in the retail end of the car business was that they were always looking for people. So if you happened to lose your job at one place, you could get another job in a half hour. But the only problem was a lot of car dealerships are open till all hours at night.
Yeah.
Where I was at, we closed at 6 every day and 5 on Saturdays. So, you know, we didn't have any of those, not that we never had, because if we had customers, we'd have to stay.
Yeah.
But it's not that we, on a regular basis, didn't get home till 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock.
What accomplishments are you most proud of?
I guess it's how to put this. I guess it's just trying to do what's right. You know, I think once a person, say a male or female nowadays, if at some point in their life they come to the realization that they're not going to be president, that they leave a much happier existence from that point forward.
Yeah.
So then you just start concentrating on the moment and doing what you, whatever decisions you make, you make them and you live by it. So I guess, I don't know if it's being proud or I'm glad that, one way I'm glad I wasn't famous.
Yeah.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, I'm glad I wasn't famous because of something negative that I did. So in other words, I fell in between the two and just kind of flew under the radar.
What is one thing that you want people to remember about you?
I read something somewhere not too long ago. They were talking about tombstones and how they have a name on them
Yeah.
in memory of so and so.
Mhm.
And then they got dates
Yeah.
from March 31st, 1940 to whatever,
Yeah.
right? And I guess what you want to be remembered for is what you did between the dash.
Mhm.
That was from where you started and ended. Was it good, bad, or, I mean, but you want people to remember good things about what you did between the dates.
Mm. As a child, how did you spend Christmas?
We used to go to my grandmother's, and all the aunts and uncles would come, and then once we moved, uh, uh, this is, I guess, it's awful to say. I don't ever remember Christmas.
Oh.
I just don't.
Yeah.
I know we had them, but I couldn't give you an example of where I was at
Yeah.
on any given Christmas.
When you were a kid, did you remember like any like natural disasters or tornadoes, like blizzards or floods or anything like that?
Growing up in Iowa, had a lot of tornadoes, and so I remember those. I mean, sometimes when I was working, I got caught in one and almost got right in the middle of it. And but the force of those, you know what they can do. But flooding, town I lived in was right on the Mississippi River, and so that used to flood almost every spring, and then the water would come up into downtown, and stores and businesses would be closed. But that's storms, you know, here in Colorado, in 1982, we had what we called the blizzard of '82. It started snowing about 7 o'clock in the morning. And Kathy at that time was working at Kmart, and so we took her to Kmart. And then it kept snowing, it kept snowing. So finally they were closing, so we picked her up and we got home. And it snowed 27 inches, I think, in 24 hours.
Oh wow.
And we had some friends stop by the house in the afternoon, and they had a big pickup truck. And they lived like 4 blocks away. And they left to go home, and they couldn't get out, so they had to walk home. And it took them over an hour to walk,
Oh my gosh.
like 4 blocks. And so the snow was so deep, we had a railing up on the second floor of the house that the kids could climb out through the bedroom window onto the railing and just jump backwards off into the snow. And
That would be fun.
so it was, we weren't able to get out of the neighborhood for, it was close to a week
Oh wow.
before and it was mostly rear-wheel drive cars then, and you had to have chains. And if you went out to buy chains, you know, I just used to say an example, set of chains normally cost $10. Well, at this particular time, they were charging like 50,
Oh no.
you know, because everybody
Yeah.
wanted chains, and so they were making them money while they could.
Were there any like, what is that called? Earthquakes. When you guys lived in California,
Yes, it was.
were there a lot?
No, it was just, primarily one that was like where we lived. And it happened about 6:30 in the morning. And actually, we were all in bed at the time, but actually, I mean, the bed literally coming off the floor,
Oh, wow.
moving across the floor, right? Things falling off the walls and stuff. And afterwards, they would have what they called aftershocks.
Yeah.
And you know those kind of like little speed bumps or things that when you come into a stop sign that they want you to know is there, or on the edge of a road that they want to make sure you don't go off. When your tires hit it, they go.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's, you could be going down the highway and one of those aftershocks would hit, and that's what the car felt like. I mean, just as you were going down the highway, because the ground was shaking underneath you. So.
That'd be scary. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had one brother and one sister. I actually had two brothers and one sister, but had one brother who was 2 years younger than I was, fall off the couch when he was young and fractured his skull and died. And so I just have my brother who lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. My sister lives in Peachtree City, Georgia.
Are they older than you or younger?
Both younger. My brother's 4 years younger than I am. My sister's 8 years younger than I am, and 4 years younger than her brother.
Did you guys have any hobbies or things you like to do together when you guys were younger?
No. I mean, and I don't, it sounds kind of crude, but I was 4 years older than my brother. So there was
that's like Nick and I.
a span there that is maybe tough to bridge sometimes. And, my sister, she was 8 years younger, plus she was a girl.
Yeah.
So, so I had real obstacles there, right?
Yeah.
So, I got out of high school and I went to college. And when I got out of college, my brother was in college. And so, 4 years I didn't really see my sister or brother. And then for the next 4 years, it was the same thing. And wasn't too long after I got out of college, I ended up getting married, and then, we didn't have just I guess, different interests at different times.
Yeah. When did your family get their first car?
I don't know the answer to that. I always remembered us having a car, but I don't know at what point in time that it really made an impact on me. I just thought everybody had one.
Yeah. When did you first learn to drive a car?
I first learned it when I was probably about 13, 14 years old. I used to go to my grandfather's farm every summer, and I would stay up there all summer and help on the farm. And so they, out in the country, and they have gravel roads and stuff, and so a lot of times they would let me drive a little bit. We were way out in the middle of nowhere. The only thing I could go into was a ditch.
Okay. What was your first car? Do you know, like, make and brand?
My,
Yeah.
uh, my first car was uh, 1947 Ford Coupe, little black. And I took, had what they call porter walls put on it. And they were like fake white walls.
Oh.
And then I had Hollywood mufflers put on it. And it was a sweet car. And then I had a 47 Ford Coupe. And these are cars that I would buy during the summer to get back and forth to work when I was home from school.
Yeah.
And then I had a 49 Ford sedan. Then I had a 1957 Chevrolet, which I wish I still had today. And then I had I think it was probably a 1959 Chevrolet, two doors.
Do you have a philosophy of life to share with your descendants?
Was that on the list before? I remember seeing that one.
Yeah, it was.
I would say just do the right thing and be responsible.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think being responsible is probably one of the most important traits, because that covers a lot of things.
Yeah.
If you're responsible, you'll go to school, you'll be at work on time, you do what you should be doing rather than things that you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with just being responsible and trying to do the right thing, not being the most famous person in the world, nor the most infamous or whatever.
In your opinion, what has been the greatest advances or inventions in your time?
Well, I guess I would have to go back to what I was talking about earlier. I basically have seen the start of electricity, the start of phones, the start of TVs, the start of portable phones, the start of color television, the start of high definition television, the start of computers. I mean, everything from basically horse and buggy that we were talking about earlier up to where we are today, which is it makes you wonder what the lifespan of today's generation will hold.
Yeah.
In other words, with what's going on now,
Yeah.
what is it going to be like? And I think you can already see it coming. Cars that drive themselves. I mean, they got these things and they're working on them, and but my lifetime, I look back and I think it was a fairly simple time to grow up.
Yes.
It had no major earth-shattering decisions that you had to make along the way. I had virtually no drugs. Nobody knew what they were, and so that was not an issue. So it was just kind of business as usual every day.
Yeah. What things have given you the most satisfaction, like, in your life?
Being retired like that. But no, I think in all seriousness, I had 4 children, and for the most part, all doing well. In other words, every one of them once they left home, not that this that makes them good or bad,
Mhm.
okay, I don't mean it that way. But, none of them have ever come back.
Yeah.
You know, you see some families that, kid goes to college and he graduates from college and he, all once he gets out, he doesn't get a job, he moves back in with his parents and they can't get rid of him, you know,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
so there they are, they mentally thought that they were done with this and he would be moving on to bigger and better things, right? And now he, all at once he's dragging them down worse than ever.
Mhm. What do you consider to be your most important achievement?
My most important achievement?
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't know what I would say to that.
Okay. I think we're done.
All right.